Hi, Paul Keeley from Ekobuilt. We are a company that has a mission of providing affordable passive house solutions right across North America. And when you think about or what controls affordability, it's relatively simple for us to build any house affordable. But when you add in all the outside the house costs is where it sometimes gets unaffordable. And cost of land and developing that land is ultimately what we're talking about. And what makes a passive house most affordable is building it as small as possible, where you can live in that home and still maintain the comfortable integrity. Now, is a tiny home for you? We have a special guest. Her name is Natasha. She's enthusiastic about tiny home. She's been living in her own for the past 7 years. We hope you enjoy. Let's go and check it out.
Hi, I'm Natasha. Welcome to my tiny beach house. I started my tiny house journey back in 2016 by going to a tiny house show in Quebec. And I decided that as a renter for my entire adult life, this would be the type of home ownership that would fit me most because it's small, it's efficient, financially I could afford it with a little room to spare. And the fact that it was mobile meant that if I hated my neighbors, I could move. I fell in love with a builder. I showed them my tiny house design that I had come up with after watching all of those YouTube videos, literally on a napkin. And I hired them to make that napkin into an actual floor plan. Then after that, I ended up hiring them to build me the house. So when designing the tiny house, there's 4 areas of concern. There's the kitchen, living room, bathroom, and bedroom. And you need to decide what is the most important and what is not so important. So for me, the living room was the most important spot. So I have a 6-foot couch, which is great. I wanted to be partially off-grid in case there was power failures, as I heard that was common living in a tiny house, which is typically living on someone's property, usually on a farm or somewhere pretty rural. So I have a propane furnace. I also have these really big windows, and because I face south, I get a lot of heat coming in the winter. So if it is -20, but a super sunny day, I can actually turn down or even off my heat because of all the sun that comes in the windows. So this is my bathroom. I knew that I wanted it to be multi-purpose, which obviously is a huge theme in tiny houses. I have a bathtub, which not all tiny houses have. I have a spot for laundry, for washing machine. I have a separate toilet. My closet is here. I figured there's no point having your clothes stored upstairs when your laundry was here. You're not going to wash it, put it up upstairs, bring it back downstairs to change. So I have it all here. So I have a fairly large bathroom. I also have a little wall heater just because the heat from the main source doesn't always make it into the bathroom, and nobody likes getting out of a shower into a chilly room. Welcome to my loft. I happen to use my loft for sleeping, and I know that according to OBC code, that is not allowed. But I don't know why, because this is about a 4-foot ceiling. I'm on a 15-inch mattress. I'm 5'8", sitting up straight, and I still have height. It is the best place in the house, honestly. This is my favorite place. At night, I close the curtains to kind of block off the light, and it is just the most coziest, peaceful place to sleep. If it rains, you can hear the rain on the roof. It is just a very calming, cozy spot, and I really wish that sleeping lofts were permitted within the tiny house builds. One of the reasons that I decided to go tiny was obviously financial. I bought the house 7 years ago, and back then houses weren't where they are today. Rent wasn't where they are today. So that aside, tiny houses were super affordable. They're even cheaper than they are today. I love that fact. I love the fact that I could own something and still be able to go out for dinner if I wanted to, still be able to go on a trip if I wanted to. I love the fact that I could design it myself. I could take all of my dreams and wishes and the way I live my life and put it into a house exactly the way that I wanted it to be. I love the fact that it was mobile, because if I didn't like my neighbors, I could move, or if I wanted to try out a different area of the province, I could move. I loved that ability of it. And so again, being a renter for my entire adult life, I was like, this is it, right? This is what I'm going to do. So I went the tiny house life, and there is, regardless of whether it's tiny or traditional, there's always that first couple of months of, oh, I didn't realize I needed to pay for this, or oh, what about that cost? So there was a little bit of a financial crunch, but I figured it out. And since then, I have been able to own my own home and go out for dinner when I wanted and take that trip if I wanted to. So it did offer me the financial freedom. What it also offered me is, I wouldn't say it offered, but it forced me in a way that I wanted, is that it forced me not to buy stuff. Right? You see something, oh, like, that's really nice, I could put it in this room. Well, I can't do that. And it's a good thing because I don't want to. We just are naturally inclined to like buy pretty things. So I like the fact that it kept me simple. I love efficiency and I love organization. So that also spoke to me in the tiny house world. And I think the whole lifestyle of being tiny will always be with me. And if I was to ever buy traditional, or if I was to buy a second tiny home, again, I would say tiny. Tiny is for me. I've realized that I don't want large. I see some of the houses that are being built today. I'm like, I could live in one of your 4-car garages and be perfectly happy. So I really would love to see the traditional home market start going small. I think that there are people for every size of house, but they're really just looking at the medium to large size houses. And what about the small? What about the smaller houses? You know, as someone with a single income, one, I can't afford it, and two, I don't want large. The other thing about tiny houses is the joke is how quickly it takes to clean. It is very true. It does not take very long to clean. And I love the fact that I don't have to spend all day cleaning the toilets and mopping the floors. I can do that in an hour and have everything done. It gets messy quickly for sure, but it also cleans really quickly. So I enjoy that as well. There's not as much maintenance as there is in a traditional home, right? My parents have a traditional 25 square foot house and they have 4 bathrooms that even if they're not used, they still get dusty, they still have to get cleaned, whereas I have 1. So I appreciate the fact that everything is smaller and takes less time. Some of the issues that I've had with living tiny really have nothing to do with the house itself. It's more home ownership. I was a renter for 18 years before I bought a house. And so going as a renter my entire life, I lived under my parents' roof, so they handled everything. Then I was a renter, my landlord handled everything. And then I bought a house, now I have to deal with it. And so I found that a little challenging. And one point that maybe does have to do with the tiny house is that sometimes when something needed to be fixed, trying to find someone to fix it, if it's beyond my scope, beyond my skill, or something I just wasn't prepared to handle, finding someone that understood tiny houses and didn't want to come in with traditional methods that just don't work for the house, or that was willing to do a job that isn't going to cost a lot because it is a small house. So that I would say was one of the challenges of living in a tiny house, is the maintenance that I wasn't familiar with, and then finding people to help for some of the jobs that I just couldn't do myself. Those are the 2 biggest challenges. A couple of my favorite features of my house is the loft, the awning windows, and that window across above the kitchen there. The loft, like I mentioned before, is just the coziest spot. Close the blinds at night. If the windows are open because it's a nice day, if it's raining or not, it's just like a little cocoon. I have the best sleeps up here. The other thing is the awning window. So a lot of my windows are awnings, so the type that just the bottom slides out. Once the weather is nice, I open them and they don't close again until the fall. I love the fact that it can pour rain and it doesn't matter, the rain doesn't come in. And the window in the kitchen loft there, I saw that in a tiny house and I really, really loved it. It's not a space that I use often. It's used for storage, so I don't go up there very often, but the fact that that window lets in a lot of light. It also faces east, so it gets all the morning sun, but it lets in a whole bunch of light, so that loft area isn't totally dark. It's just a really cool feature, and all it is a square window put on its tip. Secondary dwellings. So a lot of municipalities now are allowing secondary dwelling units, which is fabulous because it increases the density without really impacting the environment, because there's already a home on the property. So if you were to build a secondary dwelling unit, a traditional style, you would have to submit the plans, you would have to get the permits, you'd have to get the approvals and the walkthroughs at the various steps, etc. And that costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. And then you could rent it for probably a good amount of money in today's world, but it would still take you time to recoup it. Or you could put a tiny house, and the cost to put in a tiny house would be significantly less because you would just have to put in the pad that the house would sit on, and you'd have to hook up to your existing water, septic, or sewer and electrical. So significantly less cost than building an entire house. But the other benefit is that the person bringing the tiny house would be responsible for getting the permit within the municipality to park on your land. And you don't have to maintain the house. If they are really bad tenants, you don't have to worry about them damaging your property. And when they leave, they take everything with them. So I think that's a much better solution to the housing issues that we're having today with trying to get more density, with the lack of money that people have to put in these secondary dwelling units, is allow tiny homes. So much easier, so much quicker, so much cheaper for the homeowner. The tiny house movement is constantly changing. It is so new, and it's always improving, and it's getting better, and it's taking its sweet time to do so. But it's hard to pin down. So those that want to live tiny, and there are so many people that want to live tiny, the way that infrastructure wise is that the Ontario government says, yes, tiny houses, great, let's do it. Municipalities, is up to you. Municipalities, it's each and every municipality that makes their own rules, which makes it really difficult. So if I wanted to live in Aurora and I got approval and I found land and I had a homeowner that was willing and I could do it, great. And then let's say 5 years later I want to move, and now I want to move to Brantford. They could have completely different rules. My house is no longer allowed there. So that's difficult. It would really be nice if just everyone got on board with one set of rules for tiny houses. Therefore, you could live anywhere in Ontario without having to constantly change and adapt. It would really be nice too if tiny houses like this one work the plan into these tiny houses rather than the houses into the plan. Like, I think, everyone who's ever come to see my house, the two things that they say is it's so much nicer than they thought, and it's so much bigger than they thought. And there's certain elements about a tiny house that I don't personally understand why they're not allowed. And I'm sure there are reasons, but have those reasons changed, or are those reasons really old and just need to be updated? That's something that I would love to see change and improve in the world. And for those that are looking to get into the tiny house movement, you have to talk to your municipality and you have to find your spot first. That's the two biggest things. If someone is interested in building a tiny house, assuming they're going through a builder, is to definitely vet your builder. There are many tiny home builders in Ontario and in Canada right now. The thing with tiny home builders is that you don't have to go in your province per se. They ship everywhere, and the big ones are familiar with codes all over the place. But get to know your builder. Have they built before? Vet them as if you were dating them. Like, don't just, oh, you're a builder, great, let's go with them. You really, really want to know what they've built, how they've built it. Can you talk to past clients? Are they going to build to the proper code in where you're living? Are they going to build a house that is suitable to you? So are they going to do predetermined models that they only build certain models, or are they going to do custom build? That, I think, is one of, let's say, the top 5 biggest things that you really need to research and look into before you jump into tiny house life, is make sure that the builder that you're going with is knowledgeable and the right one for you. When your house is being built, and as your house is being built, and once it's built, to have all of the information that you can on your house, everything, all the specs, what's in the walls, what's in the floor, pictures, data, what's in your roof, everything. Because you just never know when, one, you may need it, or two, if something happens to your builder, if your builder sells and they no longer own the company and your information gets lost, or they go bankrupt. You just never know. I know that there are thousands of people out there that want to go tiny, and I think it's really important for people to be very vocal about that. How will home builders and municipalities know that there's a demand for smaller homes unless people are saying, I want a smaller home? I will drive by an area where you can see that there's a new subdivision coming. It's like homes starting in the low 900s. Well, no, that's not for me. I belong to a lot of different Facebook groups for tiny homes and the lifestyle, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that want to do it, but they just can't because they don't know where to put it. So I think that if one, if municipalities weren't so afraid of tiny home communities, I would love to see a tiny home community in every single municipality. A tiny home community can take up to 1 to 2 lots that a traditional home would take, but you can put on several. Depending on the density, you could have 10, you could have 30 tiny homes. Well, that's 10 to 30 people that now have a home. And we want smaller. There is a huge demand for it. So why not embrace it? Stop fighting it. Let's embrace it. The other thing is that if a municipality has a tiny home community, that brings in revenue, because now people want to move there. The people that live there can do so financially in a way that they can spend outside of their home because they can afford to. So where are they going to spend that money? In the neighborhood. They're going to go for dinner. People are going to want to come see these communities. So I think it's a win-win for everyone, right? We want these homes. There is the land available. You were going to build a house on it anyways. Why not build 10 tiny houses, right? Where I live, some of the properties are acres. There's actually a spot here in town that I think it's been sitting there for 15 to 20 years. It's a little dead end cul-de-sac where they wanted to build homes. There was an issue with it, and it's been sitting vacant ever since. Well, why not put tiny houses on there? The way that tiny houses work in regards to infrastructure, in regards to water and gray water, is so much smaller, such a smaller footprint than a traditional home, that you could do that. You could put many homes on one lot and not overwhelm the system, so to speak. There are ways to do this, and I just don't understand why there's so much pushback, or at least resistance. Maybe resistance is a better word. Why there's so much resistance. It's a win-win for everyone. We have strides to go, and there's so many different positive ways we could do this that I really hope that we can.